going to tell you guys about my transphobic mother, right? And while I was sleeping, I woke up to someone putting their hand over my mouth, one hand over my mouth, and one hand trying to undo my pants. So y'all, I made a video the other night talking about Ne-Yo's comments on trans kids, and apparently it's ruffled a few feathers. And to that I said, good, I'm glad it's ruffling feathers, because y'all need to be educated out there. And if I'm helping to do that, if I'm helping to educate and ruffling feathers in the process, thank you. Thank you. So anyway, people are upset. I'm going to pop some comments on the screen so you guys can see, because I had some comments about Ne-Yo's comments. So just like Ne-Yo had an opinion, girl, I have one too. Okay, so we both have opinions, and we can agree to disagree, right? So Ne-Yo hops on VLADTV, and Ne-Yo, let me tell you something. VLADTV set you up, right? They gaslit you. Well, I didn't see the video in its entirety, but they made sure to put that soundbite, that clip up on the internet, and not necessarily one talking about your new projects, your new music, whatever writing that you're doing, and because they knew that that was going to be sensational. They knew that that was going to drive viewership to them. They didn't give a damn about how it was going to affect your career, Ne-Yo, okay? To promote themselves. So you got to be smarter than that. And that's not me being shady. That's just me saying, I feel like Vlad TV took advantage of a black man, and I don't like that. They're asking Ne-Yo about trans kids, and he basically says, you know, if your son comes to you and tells you that they want to be a girl, are we just letting kids dictate who they are?
It's like, okay,
lost control.
If your little boy comes to you and says, Daddy, I want to be a girl, and you just let him rock with that, you just let...
Right.
He's 5.
Let me tell you guys something that you don't realize. I have had many gay men, gay boys, who will come to me, because very often in the community, gay men, especially those who are more effeminate, have a tendency to look up to those of us who are trans, right? And because they look up to us who are trans, they'll see us, you know, having certain men that may not be attracted to gay men. They'll see us, you know, being wined and dined by these men, and they'll think to themselves, ooh, I want to be trans. Ooh, maybe I'm trans. And I cannot tell you the number of conversations that I have had with gay men who were of the mindset that maybe I'm trans too, where I'm like, no, baby, this ain't what you want. You don't want to do this. This ain't what you want, because you have to be rock solid and fortified and know who you are before you make the decision to transition, because it's no joke. It's no game. And that's why, so this notion of trans people grooming children, trans people are going to be the first ones trying to dissuade your children. The first ones trying to dissuade anyone who is considering being trans from making that transition, because we know how hateful this world is. So this notion that we're out here grooming people and trying to pull people into the fold, for what? For what? I don't want to see anyone have to deal with the hate and bigotry that I've had to deal with. I don't wish that on someone. And so I'm going to talk them through it and say, listen, if that is who you are, you need to make that decision after you've done your research. You need to make that decision after you've thought about it comprehensively, after you thought about how you're going to work, after you thought about, you know, if you have to get on the bus and get to work, how you're going to feel going into public. You need to really think about this, because the implications on your day-to-day life are serious. And I get so exhausted with people thinking that we're out here grooming people, when in actuality, most trans women are the first ones trying to dissuade people from transitioning, because we don't want them to have the same struggles. Now that I've said that, when Ne-Yo spoke recently, he was talking on VLADTV. One of the things that I did not like, now he's entitled to his opinion, and I'm entitled to not like the opinion and also to disagree with the opinion. One of the things that I did not like is that this oversimplification of what it means to be the parent of a trans child, as if these trans parents are just on a whim saying, okay, we'll help you transition. That's not how it works. When you have a child who is trans, this is a day-to-day battle that these parents are fighting, right? They're trying to take, you don't think that these parents are taking away dolls? You don't think that these parents are saying, no, you can't dress like a girl? You don't think that these parents are saying, put mama's nail polish back? You don't think that these parents are saying, quit playing in mama's heels? These parents are telling the kids that. They're not just waking up and just saying, okay, cool, you're trans, let's go figure out how to move this train forward. So let me tell you guys this will be a little story time. I'm going to tell you guys about my transphobic mother, right? And so this is one of many incidents that happened when I was growing up. It had to have been around maybe 8, 9, 10, somewhere around that age range. And my mother was dating this guy. And they were going out someplace, so she took me over to his mother's house because I was familiar with them. I'd been there several times before. She took me there so that I could be there. I was 8, 9, 10, so I wasn't old enough to be left alone, but I was old enough that I didn't necessarily require a babysitter, right? And my brother was out of town at this point in time. He had gone to my grandparents. I didn't want to go because I just didn't want to separate from my mother. I was just one of those kids that I was attached at the hip to my mother. So when he would go out of town, I'd be like, no, I'm staying with my mom. So the two of them, my mother and her boyfriend, had gone out. I was at the house. I was on the sofa watching Showtime at the Apollo, so you guys know about the period. So I was watching Showtime at the Apollo, and I had fallen asleep, right? And when I fell asleep, I fell asleep facing the sofa. So my face was basically towards the pillows, and my back was towards the living room. I hope that makes sense. And while I was sleeping, I woke up to someone putting their hand over my mouth, one hand over my mouth, and one hand trying to undo my pants. And I woke up kicking and screaming and flailing, doing everything I could in my 9, 10-year-old body to get this adult man off of me, right? And when I turned around, because my face was facing the sofa, and he looked and he saw my face, I don't know if that triggered something in him or what happened, but he immediately stopped and he let me go. And he started apologizing profusely. I'm sorry. And there was someone else who stayed. It was one of those houses. My mother's boyfriend's mom had a guy who stayed in a room upstairs. And so I darted upstairs to his room because that felt safe to me, right? And I stayed there in his room and waited for my mother to get home. And so finally, she came home, and I can't remember if the guy told her or if I told her, but I remember disclosing or recounting exactly what had happened happened to me, to her. And so before I could even finish the story, she reached out at me, grabbed me so hard and so aggressively that her nails clawed into my chest. I'm talking broke skin. There were welts all across my chest. My t-shirt was ripped and hanging off of my body. And I began crying, and her boyfriend stepped in and was trying to break it up because he felt like it was misplaced aggression, which it was. And at that time, as a child, I didn't understand why she was so angry at me. But in retrospect, looking back on it, I realized that she felt like because I was so effeminate, because this wasn't the first time we'd had conversations about, whether or not I was gay, who I was, this, that, and the third. Those questions had been posed to me long before because I was overtly effeminate, right? It wasn't a guessing game. And so, obviously, because I was overtly effeminate, she felt as if that was a contributing factor to why this man attempted to violate me. And she went downstairs and went ham on him too. So let me say that. But the homophobia, the transphobia, all of the messages that she had been fed led her to believe that somehow I too was accountable for what had almost happened to me. Now, fast forward several years later, I'm an adult, I've gotten my own place, and my mother was making dresses for me. We would go shopping and get makeup, and, the dynamics of our relationship completely shifted, right? And it took her a point, and I don't care whether it was 10 years old, 20 years old, or 30 years old. At no point in that time, if you went and asked my mother, hey, do you want a trans daughter? Her answer would have probably have been no, right? I'm sure it would have been. But what she began to realize over time was she didn't have control over that. This was me. I was going to be me. And this wasn't a reflection of her mothering. This wasn't a reflection of how I was reared. This was just innately who I was as a person. And I tell this story because when we talk about this whole Ne-Yo thing and people talk about trans parents, I'm saying to you that there are trans kids out here and LGBTQIAP plus kids who are being abused by their families every single day. Berated verbally, abused physically. The shelters are full of them. Go down to a local teen or children's shelter, you will see that there is a large demographic of LGBTQIAP plus children because their families have discarded them. So when you have people like Ne-Yo who talk about whether or not parents should allow their children to be themselves, there are a lot of parents who will just discard the child entirely. They don't want any parts of it. And so that's why I speak up and speak out about this, because parents need to understand that if you have an LGBTQIAP plus child, at the end of the day, what you need to decide is what type of human being do you want to create? Do you want to create one that is intelligent, one that is well-adjusted, one who is driven, one who is passionate, one who is self-assured? That's what is most important.